Hi everyone, Sally Garozzo here and welcome to Menopause Mindset Monday. So this is the place to learn how to have a better menopause using the power of the mind. So it is so hot today here in the UK. I have got my window open, I have got my door open. So if there's any excess noise or anything visual walking past, that's why. So I hope you're doing well. My brain is feeling a bit like melted ice cream today, so I will try to do my best. But let me know how you're doing today on this very hot day in the UK. And please watch to the end because I've got a little giveaway for you, which I think you are going to love. So the reason I wanted to talk about this topic today is that many women just don't really see the link between PTSD, trauma, and severe menopause symptoms. But there is a link. There was a study done by the Mayo Clinic, which I've mentioned before, that shows there is a link. But I wanted to just take a little bit of a deeper dive into it today because it's something that I keep seeing. So I keep seeing in many menopause forums, women looking for that quick fix solution, the CBD oil to help with the anxiety, the sleeping tablets to help with the insomnia, the HRT. Now, those are okay. I'm not saying don't do those things, but I think we need to look deeper. And many women I'm seeing, are failing to address the psychological, the neurological aspects of menopause, the behavioral aspects of menopause and midlife, because, midlife and menopause are sort of intertwined, really. And in this sense, when you don't address the psychological, the neurological, the behavioral, you're not addressing your menopause holistically. You are addressing it kind of pathologically, right? And it's not a disease, it's a transition. So we have to take into account all of those things. So, and the reason why many women don't take into account all of these things is because there's not really much talk about it. And that's why I want to talk about it, because there's not much that's known about the link between trauma and menopause. There's not much scientific evidence. There's kind of anecdotal evidence, and there's like what we as therapists know instinctively. So we can make an educated assumption. But there's no hard and fast sort of, well, there's probably some, but there's not loads. So the problem with ignoring the emotional and neurological aspects of PTSD and menopause is that no matter how hard you try to fix your symptoms using things like supplements or, black cohosh or yam or HRT, in the long term, it's not going to work. So it's a bit like building a house on sand rather than building a house on solid foundations. And when we're going through the menopause, we are going through a change. And when we're going through a change, we can become dysregulated. And when we have PTSD, we are already dysregulated. So it sort of makes things worse. Like any kind of change, our root chakra becomes a bit wobbly, becomes a bit deficient or excessive. So, like when we're moving a house, when we're getting married, when there's a birth, when there's a death, any kind of rite of passage, puberty is the same, we become wobbly. So we need to build strong foundations so that we can get through it. And midlife is a great time to do that. If you can do it before midlife, then your midlife transition will hopefully be smoother. But, now is the time to start. So in this video, in this live, we're going to be talking about what is PTSD, why can PTSD affect your menopause? I've already alluded to that, but more importantly, what can we do about it? Right. So what is PTSD? So we think that it's only war veterans or people that have been in natural disasters that have PTSD, but that's just not true. I see clients who have had PTSD from things like long-term exposure to paparazzi, for example, the death of somebody close to them, or even like an animal. You can get PTSD from being in a prison. You can get PTSD from just feeling trapped. You can get PTSD from addictions. You can get PTSD from medical negligence. You can get it from toxic narcissistic relationships. You can get it from childhood neglect. You can get it from exposure to parents who are quite critical, exposure to parents who are withdrawn, exposure to parents who are unpredictable. You can basically get it from anything that causes you deep rooted shame. So things like abuse and rape, but even things that are not as dramatic as those things. Now, interestingly, PTSD can come about through exposure to long-term anxiety and depression. Even if the root of that anxiety or depression is not that dramatic. So it's the sort of impact that long-term anxiety has on the nervous system that causes the nervous system to go into hypervigilance. And that was kind of me. I would say I experienced a mild form of PTSD, which came from having anxiety for about 5 years, and then a few events within that compounding it and making it worse. So what happens is when we're hypervigilant, we then start looking out for danger, and it puts us on high alert. So what is PTSD? So basically, we have PTSD when we don't have the ability to kind of bounce back, when we're not particularly resilient and we are on high alert. So we're in that prolonged fight-flight mode, and it can create symptoms. This is what I wanted to talk to you about, the symptoms. Symptoms like insomnia, like nightmares, because your mind is trying to process what happened to you, and it's like kind of keeping you in this sort of perpetual state of fear, because your mind's always trying to protect you. It does not want you to go back there. It does not want you to go and repeat that. So it makes damn sure that you know what's going on. The other symptom is avoidance. So we can, if we have PTSD, we can sort of stay away from people, we can isolate, which, as you'll see later, this makes it worse. So this could be, crowds. We stay away from crowds. We stay away from social gatherings. We stay away from having people in our home. We stay away from family, supermarkets, or even just going outdoors. Another symptom of PTSD can be excessive negativity and negative feelings about oneself. So you might have a narrative that's going on, I'm no good, I'm useless, feelings of I'll never get out of this, I'm in a hopeless situation, is this it? Is this going to be me for the rest of my life? And resignation, like this is going to be me for the rest of my life, this low mood, this horribleness that I'm going through. And you can get quite addicted to feelings of negativity just because they become familiar, and the mind loves what is familiar and always takes you back to it. So we end up with these beliefs, the world is an unsafe place, and we get locked into that, and everywhere we look we see evidence that points to those negative beliefs. There's just this inability to see or feel anything positive. And then the fourth symptom, which I've spoken about, is hypervigilance. So you become very hyper aware. You notice things that other people might not notice. Maybe you are always trying to be in control of everything, because being in control of what's on the outside makes you feel more in control of the inside. Maybe you get sort of triggered by loud noises. Maybe you get triggered by, you sort of see things around you and you think, oh my God, that's going to kick off over there, or I can see that's just going to be a nightmare. Maybe you overread things, you overanalyze because of this hypervigilance. So it's a real thing, and PTSD can be very, very chaotic, and it can feel very out of control, very similar to the way that the onset of perimenopause can feel as well. So the two can feel very similar, and they sort of trigger each other. So before I go into the link between that, menopause and PTSD, I want to talk a little bit about polyvagal theory. Now, I'm going to put it in a way that hopefully you will understand. I'm not going to go too deep into the sciencey stuff, but by letting you know about polyvagal theory, hopefully it will make more sense to you, because it's important to understand our nervous system, and it's important to understand the many different branches, because when we think of the nervous system, we usually think of fight or flight and rest and digest, but actually there are different branches of the autonomic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. There's sort of two more that I didn't really know about and I've recently learned about. So you might want to get a notebook, you might want to write this down, and having a visual can often help you. So polyvagal theory, the man behind it is Stephen Porges, if you want to do some more research. But basically, you've got the autonomic nervous system, which comprises of the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. So as far as I'm aware, there's one branch of the sympathetic nervous system and three branches of the parasympathetic nervous system. So the sympathetic nervous system is responsible for mobilization, for arousal, for fight and flight, not freeze, but fight or flight. So I like to think of this is the one that gets you moving, right? Now, emotions such as rage, anger, energy, fear, anxiety, worry, hypervigilance are kind of associated with that state. And interestingly, people who live in that sympathetic state can often become chronically constipated, because there is, the link between the gut and the brain via the enteric nervous system and the vagus nerve is like, it's just phenomenal. It's amazing. So how we poo is kind of, linked to our nervous system. And so, people who live in this sympathetic nervous system, this fight-flight mode all the time, can often have constipation because they are contracted. They are held in. Now, it's not all bad. We need our sympathetic nervous system for things like motivation, for things like assertiveness. What I'm doing now, I'm probably in a slightly aroused sympathetic state. We need it for sex, we need it for arousal, we need it for orgasm. So it's not all bad. I want you to think of the autonomic nervous system as like a sliding scale. On the one hand, you've got that sort of hyper aroused, and on the other hand, you've got the hypo aroused. So it's like a spectrum. So let's talk about the parasympathetic response. So let's go right to the other end of that spectrum. And this is called the dorsal vagus branch. Okay, so dorsal vagus. The dorsal vagus branch of the parasympathetic nervous system is where we become immobilized. So a very extreme example of this is a gazelle being chased by a lion. The lion's caught the gazelle, and the fear response of the gazelle goes through the roof and it shuts down and it goes limp, and you see it go limp, and it looks like it's kind of died instantaneously. It hasn't died, it's just gone into freeze mode. And this is what happens when we are kind of hypo aroused, or hypo freeze is another way of describing it, when the fear has got too much for the brain and it just switches off. So in that sense, people, death is actually quite peaceful, right? We don't need to fear it. It's just the bit before. So it does this to save your life. It turns off all your kind of non-vital processes, and literally just you get a small heartbeat and a little bit of oxygen going round just to preserve life. This is a life-preserving thing, right? And it's an adaptive response. And sometimes what can happen is that we poo involuntarily, we wee involuntarily to get rid. And you see this happen sometimes, accidents. So yes, and this could be linked to bedwetting in children as well. But the part of the system that gets activated, this dorsal vagal branch that gets activated when we're in hypofreeze, this immobilization, is also linked to disassociation, to emotional shutdown, to stasis, to depression, to procrastination, can't get out of bed, feeling hopeless, feeling trapped, and also things like stonewalling in relationships. So it's in that sense, when you stonewall your partner, like when you say, I don't want to talk about it, you're shutting down. But remember, it's self-preservation, it's a preservation mode. So when things get too hard to bear, we shut down, we go into that po-faced. I'm watching a brilliant series at the moment called Good Girls, and they're sort of middle-aged women who are delving into a life of crime, and things start getting quite bad, and one of them goes into this hypo-freeze mode. She just goes really blank, whereas the others are kind of doing that whole sort of sympathetic mode. There's one of them that goes very still, very frozen, very calm. She can shut down her emotions. So it's really interesting to see it play out in different walks of life as well. Yeah, so again, this immobilization, this stasis, this procrastination, this shutting down, it's an adaptive response by your own body to preserve life. It's not your fault, it's automatic, but you can work with it and you can do something about it, which is the exciting part. I love this subject. This is like my most favorite subject, nervous system stuff. I find it really sexy. Okay, so dorsal vagus branch. Sorry, I have to keep reminding myself. There's another branch of that, which is rest and digest. So this is your it's kind of not as far down the line as immobilization, but it is on the way to. So this is your rest and digest. This is peace, calm. This is what happens when we're getting a massage. This is what happens when we are relaxed, when we've got that warm, fuzzy feeling. Men need to be in this state to get erections, to become aroused. We need to be in this state to have great bowel movements. So your gut health is linked to your nervous system massively. And we know that menopause is linked to good gut health. So you cannot separate any of the systems and processes in your body. This is why menopause needs to be seen holistically, not pathologically. So that's rest and digest. Let me talk about branch number 3 of the parasympathetic nervous system, which was new to me until relatively recently. This is called the Ventral Veigle branch, and this is to do with social connection and engagement. So when this branch of the nervous system is regulated, we are able to engage socially. We feel like we belong, we feel safe, we feel protected, we've got our tribe, we give good eye contact, we can listen to people, we can take in what they're saying, we can formulate responses. So the ventral vagal branch is above the diaphragm, so it's linked to the heart, the lungs, and the larynx as well. And for me, as a singing teacher, this is amazing because when you get nervous, your voice shakes, right? So this is that branch of the vagus nerve, because you need your voice to shake if you feel there's fear, so that you can alert other people, because we're social creatures. This branch of the nervous system, you need to be able to alert people to there's something not quite right. Survival of the species, right? So it's so exciting. When this part of the nervous system is dysregulated, we can often find that we isolate, we withdraw, we can't give eye contact, we can't listen, we feel rejected, we feel disconnected, we feel unsafe, which again puts us into high alert. So of course, all three aspects or four aspects of the nervous system are working together, and working at regulating this particular branch is very, very important for healing. I know so many women who are experiencing severe menopausal symptoms who isolate themselves, but actually that is making their stress hormones and everything that's related to stress worse, which is then going to make menopause even worse, or the feeling of symptom severity even worse. So that's a very, very quick overview on what polyvagal theory is. You've got the sympathetic, you've got the autonomic nervous system, and then underneath that you've got the sympathetic nervous system, which is arousal, mobilization. Then on the other side of the spectrum, you've got immobilization. You've then got rest and digest, and then you've got ventral vagal, which is the heart, the connection stuff. And those three are parasympathetic. So when we're in PTSD, thank you for bearing with me on that one, by the way. I hope that's been useful. When we're in PTSD, our nervous systems become dysregulated, right? So we are pendulating a lot of the time between that mobilized state and that immobilized state. And we can't seem to sort of stay in the middle. We can't find that rest and digest. We can't find that connection. So the key is, if we are unregulated or dysregulated and we can't self-regulate, we need to learn how to do that by co-regulating with others. That's the connection part, and learning to get into that rest and digest mode via things that I'm going to talk to you about in a minute. Right? I don't want to get all muddled up. So let's quickly then just put that to one side, and let's talk about how or why PTSD can affect your menopause. So because of the hormone fluctuations that perimenopause brings up, it can often feel very similar to the roller coaster ride of PTSD. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg thing here. So did the PTSD cause the severe menopause symptoms, or did the perimenopause trigger old PTSD that was already there? Or let's take it one step further. Can a traumatic menopause create PTSD in the body from there going forward, right? I think from my educated perspective, or from my informed perspective, I think yes, all of those. But it's looking at the individual, and it's looking at really unpicking it all and finding out what's happened to you, and then making sense of it from a very individualized perspective. So one thing for sure is that stress is at the center of menopause. So as estrogen lowers, cortisol rises for many women, which is the stress hormone. And because of this, many women start to experience anxiety, depression, low mood, even suicidal thoughts. So remember, the mind is always looking for pattern matches. So if this perimenopausal experience is reminding you of past stress, it will go pattern match, it will lock onto that, and it will go, oh God, this feeling reminds me of past trauma. So then when that happens, we become dysregulated, we go sympathetic, we go mobilized, immobilized. So we're swinging, we're pendulating, which is not great. If we have existing unresolved PTSD and our nervous system is already on high alert, and then perimenopause hits, can take us over the edge. We go into can't cope, this is too much for me, limp like the gazelle, right? So remember, this is an adaptive response. It's a survival mechanism. It's your body trying to help you survive, not always useful. But if we start labeling it as bad and, oh my God, this is happening, you know, the worse it's going to get. So when we understand what's happening, oh, I'm moving into shutdown, I can feel it happening, then we can start to do something about it. So how to address all of this? I think the main thing is that at menopause, we need to find ways of getting stress and trauma and PTSD out of the body as much as we can. Now, this is not a let's click our fingers thing and be done with it, and it's done. Let's wave a magic wand and, you know, go and have some acupuncture or go and have a therapy session and it's all done. This is really about relearning a new way of being, a whole new kind of behavioral setup, a whole new mindset. And whilst things, you know, like RTT can help to jumpstart that, this is really about you reparenting yourself. So how do we get PTSD out of the body? I said it before, actually. We need to learn how to self-regulate. Usually we can't self-regulate if we are in PTSD because we're in survival mode. The body is doing it for you, right? Your autonomic, pre-genetically disposed part of you is just keeping you alive. So we need to sort of take the reins a little bit and go, right, okay, we need to self-regulate. So how do we do that? There are ways that we can do that. One of the ways that we can do that is to co-regulate with a therapist or with others. So co-regulation is when you form relationships with people and you observe how they are regulating and then you regulate with them. So this is no different to women being in the same room and their cycles syncing up. There is some science behind it. I don't have access to that in my mind at this moment about what that is, but it's a very interesting topic and we could talk about that. But there's something like heartbeats, because there's an electrical, heartbeats are electrical. There's something around that when you're with somebody who can self-regulate, you hang out with them either in a therapeutic relationship or a friendship, and it helps you to calm down. So suffering in silence in this respect makes it worse. It makes it much, much worse. And the trouble is many women do suffer in silence because there is a lot of shame around PTSD, around menopausal symptoms and all of that. This is another reason why we need to just drop the shame and start talking about this stuff, because as we talk about it, we are accessing that ventral vagal branch of the nervous system, okay, which is linked to heart, regulating heart, helping you to connect with others, to help you feel safe, bonded, connected, not rejected, and secure, right? So as many of you know, I'm a rapid transformational therapist, and this is how I work with my clients. So I form that relationship with them, and that relationship that we have enables the other person to sort of co-regulate with me. And I do this through WhatsApp support, voice messages, not just the RTT session itself, which is hugely powerful in and of itself, but with that support and that coaching that we do afterwards. So this is just really about sooner rather than later. As I said before, women are trained to suffer in silence. It goes back generations because, you know, our moods have been belittled. When we have erratic moods, the people around us don't like it. They don't know what's going on. They don't understand what's going on. They can't help, you know, we probably trigger them, their ancestral wounding. So really it is up to us to do what we can to avoid this vicious cycle. Yeah, and there is significant evidence that says talking to others helps. To discharge the shame, discharge the fear, discharge the anger. when we're in these mobilized states, we need to discharge that energy. That's why after a gazelle's been chased by a lion and survives, it shakes. It's discharging the fear, right? So if we can shake, we help ourselves. All right. So another thing that you can do, and I absolutely love this one, is to practice switching in between nervous system states and coping, right? So there's this idea called relaxation on demand. So when you are hyper aroused, one of the most helpful things that you can do is learn to come away from that state. However, this takes practice because it's a bit like exposure therapy. So if you're doing this consciously, you consciously arouse yourself. I don't mean sexually, I mean fear-based in whatever way. So there's an exposure there. You have to be exposed to something fear-based, and then you have to practice regulating your nervous system by way of mental self-talk, elongated out-breath, and other things that you can do. So there's a brilliant TED talk, which I'd love you to go and watch, with a free diver called Stig Sevenson, sorry, called Breath Holding is the New Black. And he basically says that when you are learning to free dive, if you panic, you die. Because if you panic, you breathe in underwater, and that's no good. So when you feel that panic coming when you're underwater, you have to learn to relax. And it's a life or death situation, so you have to do it. I'm not suggesting by any stretch of the imagination that you go out and dunk your head underwater to practice relaxation over panic. But what I am saying is there are ways of doing it. So that's very interesting. Go and have a look at that. So another way that you can learn to sort of switch off your another way that you can learn to regulate your sympathetic nervous system is to elongate your out breath. So we know that when you elongate your out breath, your heart rate slows down. When you pant, your heart rate goes up. So effectively, you have this tool, your respiratory system can take you from the sympathetic to the immobilized state. Okay, let's think of it as a journey. So when you pant, you're traveling towards being hyper aroused, and when you are holding your breath, you are traveling towards that immobilization. Of course, you don't want to get to immobilization, you want to get to rest and digest. So it's brilliant, actually. Now, if you have gone too far, if you've gone to the immobilized state, if you're shutting down, if you've gone into disengagement, if you've gone into sulking, if you've gone into pissed offness, if you've gone into the sort of freeze mode, the procrastination mode, or the just kind of cut off from your feelings mode, you need to then start doing things that are sensory. So you need to get a massage, you need to start just feeling your body on the chair, you need to start observing the things that are around you, you need to start smelling things, tasting things, touching things, to start bringing you kind of back into your sensory awareness, into your body. If you've become disconnected from the connection element of the parasympathetic nervous system, what you want to do is start forming and creating those connections again safely. So having a therapist is one way to do that. But ultimately, things like sharing your story, listening to other people's stories, talking is going to help you to sort of regulate that part of the nervous system, meals out, hanging out with friends, that kind of thing. But, this is really all about exercising the nervous system, like exercising any muscle. You need to sort of challenge it, and you also need to stretch it, right? So panting and breath holding. takes you from one end to the other end. Cold showers, I think that's sympathetic, to warm showers towards rest and digest, right? So cold, warm. Orgasm and release. Fast, slow training. So fast running as fast as you can, and then walking, things like that. So any kind of intermittent hyperarousal and hypoarousal is really going to help you. Doing things like public speaking, which is quite arousing, to then going into meditation afterwards. That's going to help you. I remember doing something called an dynamic meditation, which is 3 hours long. You're literally locked in a dark room and you go through all these different emotional states. That's the idea. Like, you're really exercising the emotion, you're purging, but you're also working the nervous system as well. So finally, probably the most important one of the lot, because it really weeds out the PTSD from the root, is to change the meaning that you attached to the traumatic story in the first place, so that when you think about it, you have a very different nervous system response. And this is where the therapy that I do, rapid transformational therapy, comes into play here. So for those of you who don't know what it is, RTT was designed and developed by Marissa Peer. It's taken the world by storm. We're collating lots of evidence-based information around it at the moment, because we're trying to get it into hospitals and prisons and schools, because it really is so good. So it's the RTT process in itself is a 2-hour process that's done under hypnosis, where we go back to a scene where you picked up some trauma and we make sense of it. So when the trauma happens, it kind of gets lodged into the nervous system and you create a meaning. This is bad. This means shut down. This means I'm not enough. This means life is hopeless. Whatever meaning you attached to that scene. When we look at that scene from a therapeutic relationship point of view, you get to see it differently. You get to relive it, review it, re-experience it, but in a way that is different. You're being handheld through the process, you're being acknowledged, but you also then get to see it in a way that is not so traumatic. So you get to then change the meaning that you attached to that scene. The more we don't go there, the worse it gets. We have to go there. We have to look at the memory, and we have to practice dealing with it differently, just like those free divers have to practice not panicking underwater, relaxation on demand. So many people are really worried about having therapy and reliving traumatic memories and experiences, especially under hypnosis, but this is actually what we need to do so that you can practice coping in a very, very different way and looking at it from a different perspective. And that's where the power lies. You actually get to rewrite the ending, which is super powerful. So you get to look at the story, tell the story, you get to be heard through the story, and then you get to rewrite the ending, which is what changes the nervous system response. So when you work with me, like I said before, you get your 2-hour RTT process, which can be totally done via Zoom. In fact, most of my sessions are being done via Zoom at the moment. You get your WhatsApp support. We get a therapeutic alliance going on. You get your 2 coaching calls, your 2 follow-up coaching calls, or kind of counselling calls, or reflection calls, whichever way you want to look at it. And you also get a recording to listen to for 30 days after your treatment, which helps to wire in those changes, because the mind learns through repetition. And the price of all of that is just $397. So if you are feeling it, go to my website, which is sallygarozzo.com, book yourself in for a consultation, and we can have a chat about it. So like I said, working with people who are in the menopause, maybe having PTSD or who have had PTSD, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. It needs to be tailored to the individual. Okay, so let's conclude everything that we've spoken about today. There's been quite a lot, and maybe you might want to go back and listen to this video again to absorb it second time. It will go in deeper on second listening. So if you're experiencing a bad menopause or menopause symptoms that are quite severe, my advice to you is start now. The longer you leave this emotional clutter clearing, the worse it's going to get for you. So start now. This work that you do can be incredibly fulfilling, incredibly nourishing, and incredibly life-changing. You know, the quality of your life has the potential to improve so much. And I just recently worked with a client whose life has changed so much in the last, 2 to 3 weeks. Hey, Susie. Thank you. When you learn how to regulate your nervous system, you have much more control over your responses. You have much more control over your ability to be assertive. You need to walk into that doctor's surgery and get some HRT. Many doctors are turning women away, but no, you need to go and be assertive. You need to speak out. You need to stand up for what you need. You need to be able to have the confidence to be heard. Many women can't do that because they're so riddled with shame, guilt that comes from all this past trauma, all these wrongly held beliefs about themselves, like I'm not enough, I need to be perfect, I'm not lovable, all of that stuff. So when you have access to your nervous system, when you can self-regulate your nervous system, you have more control over your hormones, your mood, your mindset, which is going to significantly improve the quality of your life. And you'll be able to cope with more, you'll have more resilience. But what I find is many people are still really resistant to investing in themselves. I was having a conversation with Deb Passley from the Midlife Hub, and she was saying that many people, women and men, feel that investing in themselves is a luxury. Well, I'm here to tell you, no, it's not a luxury, it's a utility. Just like you pay for your water bill, just like you wouldn't not pay that or your electricity bill, it should be that we wouldn't not pay for our self-care and for clearing this all out. This is the time. If you don't do it now, it's like so many people are working on clearing their stuff now. If you're not doing it, there's a worry that you're going to be left behind. And with a failing kind of political and economic and health system, we really need to be in charge of our own health and putting yourself first, because you deserve to feel better. You don't deserve to feel horrid and awful. Menopause does not have to be miserable. All right, just one final thing, one final little announcement that I wanted to make, and that is that I've created a free relaxation recording for you to do for 20 minutes a day for 30 days if you want to get the best out of it. So if you are hyper aroused, you can use this as a way of practicing getting back into that rest and digest mode. And there's even a little bit of that ventral vagal connection as well, that heart connection, because you're doing it with someone. I am there guiding you, so you can see me as a bit of a friend, as opposed to a sort of sitting solo meditation where it's kind of just you. So in that sense, you'd be self-regulating, but in this sense, there's a little bit of co-regulation. Not as much as if you were on a one-to-one therapy situation, but you do get a little bit of that. So it is free, and if you're thinking of working with me, this is a good place to start building up that know, like and trust factor. So all you need to do is visit bit.ly/relaxation hypnosis. That's bit.ly/relaxation hypnosis. that's it. I've really enjoyed talking about this subject today. Like I say, I'm so passionate about the nervous system. I find it super sexy, super interesting. And yeah, let me know what you thought. If you've got any questions, pop them in the comments. I will respond. And that's it. Have a wonderful week. Stay cool, drink lots of water, and I'll see you next week. Bye.